says, okay. I went in, hung out for about 20 minutes, came out, still waiting there. I said, David, let's go. Walk into the bar. And when I walk in, I try to make as little bit of a splash as possible. Just want to go in and have a beer or a shot, and that's basically it. Not David. I walk in, and immediately when I walk in, I say, this is my friend David. I met him through radio. I figured I didn't want to, like, make a big celebrity entrance. And about 4 or 5 heads turn around, they're looking at him, and finally, we're halfway through our first beer, and the guy at the back of the bar goes, are you David Peel? And boy, did he light up. Yes, I am! He starts whipping out photos of him and John Lennon. There was about 7 or 8 girls in this bar. One of them was having a 25th birthday party. And it was actually kind of funny because there were guys sitting on him left and right. They weren't buying it. At one point I said, David, are you going to be okay if I head to the men's room? I'll be right back. He said, yeah, sure. I go to the men's room, I come back. By the time I come back, he's got all 8 girls dancing to Instant Karma on the jukebox. I look at the bartender, Tommy's from Ireland, he looks at me and goes, only you can bring this guy here. Needless to say, we got into a cab at around 3 in the morning. I made sure he got back home, but wherever you are, David, save the next beer for me.
The song was the Pataki song, right? On Howard Stern? It was the Pataki song.
Yeah, Howard Stern.
Howard
The
Stern.
Pataki song.
Time for a lap. Very close to here, down the street from where David lived.
Yeah.
On the corner there was this was probably 67, a Chinese restaurant. A Chinese restaurant called Ningpo. All of us, after playing in the park, passing the hat around, and we just, okay, let's go eat. So we go to the Chinese restaurant. And this happened right down the street over here. We're all in there, and we're paying for it. The money's on the table. We leave, David's still in there. And we talk about picking up the tab, and yes, and we thank the tourists for the money. And we sold the banana grass, and we're in there, and David hasn't come out. Where's David? All of a sudden, we see David running out. He looked like the FTT florist guy, running down the street, his scarf flying, and running after him is a Chinese cook with a meat cleaver. And that's when we realized the tip was missing. Hey, in those days it was tough. I remember that story. It was freezing cold, and I never saw David run so fast. I figured I'd share that. So if I can get another amen? Introduce yourself.
My name is Guy Ward, NYC Live Rock. I know a few people know me. Video streaming. My first exposure to David Peel was very interesting. If you know my history, and I'm sure David would appreciate this, I spent a lot of my years growing marijuana. Okay? And back in 1983, they had a videotape out for rent called Hot Shots. Alright, and it was a video that taught you how to grow weed. It was one of my first lessons on how to grow weed. Alright, and one of the songs on the tape was David Peel's song from Marijuana. I don't know if you know the song he does about marijuana? That was on there, and I was like, wow, this is a good song. And my friend George reminded me that, he's friends with John Lennon, and he gave me the whole spiel. Lo and behold, 25 years later, I'm at a Frank Wood show, I'm streaming it, and who shows up? And I swear this guy, I knew he had to be somebody big. I didn't recognize him because I didn't know him by face. And everybody was like, whoa, it's David, it's David, it's David, it's David. They're all like going, get away, here comes the man, And sure enough, it was David Peel. Who knew that after listening to that or watching the tape, I would meet David Peel, and he's a great guy, and I'm sorry that he had to leave us so early. Too early, 73. Anyway, 74? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it all depends on which you read.
But
39.
Hold on, that's fake news. They keep
That
getting
was-
it backwards, right?
that was my
The
exposure
media.
to David Peel. Thank you. God bless you, brother.
Okay, gentleman right here.
There was actually one time when David Peel actually took people out to dinner. And I remember.
He fed me
Really?
quite a lot.
And that's when he took a group of us to the Hare Krishna temple.
Krishna, Krishna, Hari, Hari.
Okay, hi everybody. Sorry, is that good?
What's your name?
I was about to get to it. My name's Larry Blumenstein. I've been documenting the New York City music scene for the last 30 or 40 years. And I have so many David Peel stories. I think the first thing I'd like to say, if it hasn't been said yet, is that David Peel will be going down in history at least as a footnote in every major music book, and people are going to be studying him in the future. The one thing that I know about David Peel was, first, when his album came out, and I'd gone out and bought Jimi Hendrix, and I went out and bought the Beatles, sorry, and then all of a sudden, Have a Marijuana came out. And it wasn't professionally recorded. It sounded like it was recorded right off the street in the middle of a protest. I know it was. And what an influence. I mean, just to sit there and to think that you could do something like that and get it out there. More importantly was that I don't care whether it was a black rights, women rights, whether it was whatever the political strike or opposition was. You can always count on David Peel being there. And he was like a rock. I mean, if he wasn't there, then it wasn't really a real demonstration as far as we were concerned. Whether it be Washington or anywhere, and I guarantee, wherever you go, and when you look on the clips, whether it's Martin Luther King or whoever it is, you listen long enough and he'll be up there playing. So I wanted to make that point out because he will be remembered. And unfortunately, it won't be until every maybe couple of 100 or 1,000 years when a grad student decides that they're going to do some research on New York City at this particular time period. And then they'll discover David Peel and he'll be back up in lights again. The same way when we go to museums and suddenly they rediscover some old Dutch artist that no one had listened to before, but now because that particular generation is doing something similar, and then they'll look back and they'll find David Peel. Just like with rap, you know, all of a sudden it's the, what were they called? The black poets, the last poets. I remember when I first heard that album. Suddenly, rap came out, all of a sudden they discovered the album by the Last Poets, and he became their anthem. Oh, he started it all. He influenced us all. They didn't even know he existed until the genre was there. Then they went back and found it. Same thing's going to happen with David. So his memory will be on forever, at least as a footnote, in every major textbook, in every major college. As long as it's American music.
Rock and Roll University.
You have a low light setting. You have a low light setting.
I do.
Why don't you put it on?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I've been writing about music since 1974 professionally. But I was going to concerts long before that. My first concert was in Washington Square Park in 1968. I saw David Peel on the Lower East Side with Harold playing tambourine and Billy Joe White playing guitar. Right, Billy? I was a 15-year-old pot smoker, and I really thought this was really my identity. This is where I need to be. I enjoyed that concert so much that I went back the next weekend, and then the next weekend. And if people ask me, because at this point I've seen thousands and thousands of concerts and written about them in magazines, but people ask me, what was the first concert you ever went to? I think the first 20 concerts I went to were all David Peel on the Lower East Side in Washington Square Park, just every weekend. Although I don't have a funny story to tell, well, maybe I do, I don't know. Whenever he and I would meet, he would always ask me how many times I went to see the Grateful Dead. I don't really know why, but that's one of the questions he always asked me. But we would sit even at places like Sidewalk and just talk about the music business. He was interested in how the music business operates, and I would tell him stories. And the only thing I really want to tell about this is that I just want to thank David, because as a 15-year-old pot smoker, I didn't know that I was going to go into the music business professionally. And it really was because I enjoyed his concert so much in 1968. I think anybody who has been to a David Peel concert here can say that, well, okay, he didn't sing the greatest, it wasn't the slickest show you'd ever see, but I don't think anybody could go to a David Peel show and say they didn't have a good time, right?
Aaron? Sorry, I got to hold this guitar. Hey, oh, thanks. Hey, everybody. I didn't know I was going to talk, but Elliot called me up. I first met David Peel when I was... My name is Aaron Tulloch. David used to call me Halo. I first met him. One of the first concerts I ever seen was when he was performing in Central Park for the Hair Festival. I was 14 or 15 years old, and I ran up to the front because I had Have a Marijuana and American Revolution, and I didn't even know he was still around. So I was already a big fan, not even knowing that the whole John Lennon thing. So I was already in there. So the following week, I'm on a train. I have my guitar with me because I'm going to meet a friend, and he walks on the train, and he walks in and points at me like this. He's walking in. He goes, "Hey," he goes, "you were at the Hair Festival." He says, and as a person before said, "I'm in the phone book. Call me up, and I'll get you involved with the music scene in the village." He goes, "You write songs, bring them down." And so the following week, I'm with him, and I have my songs with me, and he's going over the songs with me. He goes, "You're one of the first students of my rock and roll university, so." And so he's going over songwriting with me, and next thing I know, when if one of his guitar players were out at Mills Tavern when he performed, me underage would come up there and help out. And also I was lucky enough to with my band to record under his Orange Records label, which was a thrill, and also I got to perform to play on the 1984 album, and all these things that he taught me for the past 28 years. I've been teaching guitar and rock band in the city school system, and so the Rock and Roll University is alive and well because so many young people are learning how to play guitar, bass, and drums.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was the name of your band?
I did the 14th Wish. That was the band at the time. 14th Wish. Oh, thanks a lot.
What's up, Edwin? Hey, I'm Andy Animal. Some years ago, I invited Dave. Andy Animal.
I can't.
Dave the Animal?
By the light.
I'm Andy Animal.
Hey, move over by the light or we can't get it.
I invited Dave.
Who are you?
Who am I? Andy Animal. Andy Animal. Andy Animal. Everybody got the...
Andy Animal!
I invited Dave a few years ago to come play at one of my hippie freak-out mushroom festival things I do upstate. It's 2-day benders. Long story short, I can go on and tell you how much David Peel has affected me and touched me, but I'm really up here because Sean Lennon sent me a poem that he wanted me to read that he wrote for David.
Sean?
Yeah, John Lennon's son, Sean.
Alright.
So he wrote a poem for David Peel. He was ahead of his time. One of a kind, hearted man. Fuck the man. Forever shine. David Peel, nothing is real. There's nothing to be strung out about. Even the president takes his medicine in the end. What you've really done, or or what you've really done. You've won. Because the truth behind the sun is that we're one. We are all one. Sean Ono Lennon. Yeah, I really just came up here to, he wanted me to read that, so.
Sean know him?
He met him once in passing. Yeah, but he was touched by it as well. Touched by it.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I had no idea I was going to be up here, but they forced me, so here I am. Yeah, they pushed me. They said, you got to talk. You have your story.
What's your name?
My name is Sumati Karen Bates, and I was fortunate enough, like many of you, to meet David when I was about 14 years old in Washington Square Park. And he had just lost his female backup singer, so he asked me to come along. A couple weeks later, John saw us in the park, and I'm that girl in that video. If you see John Lennon, all of us on the David Frost show, that's me. And it was just sort of miraculous for me. But the best thing about it, really, is that he really encouraged me. He really encouraged me a lot. I was a very, very shy kid. There was no way I would ever have gotten up there in a million years if it wasn't for him saying, you can do this, you've got a great voice, you can, you know, and I wouldn't be able to stand up in here in front of all of you, you know, shaking like a leaf if it wasn't for him. I went on to work in Walter Steading's band with Andy Warhol and all that crowd. Now I sing kirtan, which is yoga chanting music. I became a yoga teacher. And I saw David not long ago, and I told him I was doing that, and he was great, you know, he just, how he was. He said, thank you for keeping my friends healthy, you know. So, anyway, it's been devastating, but, you know, I want to just, I think most importantly, we have to keep his message going, you know. It's just a darn shame that marijuana is still illegal, and we gotta keep it strong. That's all I have to say, and say his message. And thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Davison. I've recently become reacquainted with Dave. The first time I met him was about 1984, where we had about a 2-hour conversation at his apartment about his Commodore 64 computer. And it sounded like if you can indulge me for just a second, I would like to say goodbye to David. Thank you.
I'll call it if you want. Let's stop the video. Let's stop. He's missing his phone.
Yeah, I just had it here.
All right. Let's call your number. What's your number? Wait a minute. Wait. Okay.
Oh, here it is. Got it.
You got it. All right.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you. Hold it anyway.
It's a miracle.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
Wow. Hello, everyone. I'm Kent.
Hey, Kent.
I've had the great pleasure of playing drums with Dave for the last maybe couple of years, I guess. And let me tell you, just to be behind him and looking at all the goofy smiles of the audience as we've been playing the sones was incredible. Thank you.
Toward the light.
Towards the light.
Hey, that's not what the poltergeist lady said. Anyway, so you know, playing has been like such fun. Like when I've been, you know, on the shows we do. It comes to mind a little anecdote when we were playing a small club from Ludlow Street.
Was it my birthday.
It's Gabrielle's birthday. We were playing her for a birthday party. Anyway, so he's playing. They have the stage on like 1, 2, maybe 3 platforms. So he's like in the middle of the song. He's playing. All of a sudden, he takes a step over here and he falls over. Now there's a hush among the crowd. It's like, oh, you know, I know because I hear it when I fall over. So anyway, so everyone's like, "Oh, is he all right? What happened?" So without saying anything, he gets up and it was in the middle of the song when he fell over. So he gets up right back on stage, and he finishes the song like nothing happened, you know? Like, amazing, amazing. I admire that so much. Well, anyway, it's been a gas for a couple of years, and I'm gonna hopefully the Lower East Side Band will continue like Bob Marley and the Wailers. The Wailers continue. We'll figure out a way to get the Lower East Side Band to continue on. So, thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. My name is Doug Green. I met David Peel probably in either 87 or 88. At the time, I had just started a chapter of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, at my college, which was NYU. And I met David Peel. Back in the late 80s, the marijuana movement was a lot smaller than it is today in many ways. But I knew of David Peel, of course, before I met him, because I was and am a huge Beatles and John Lennon fan. And I had, I believe, both on album and 8-track, a copy of Sometime in New York City, from which New York City was taken, and knew of him before I ever met him through Dana. But, you know, I have some major passions in my life, like the Beatles, like cannabis, which is a movement I've stayed involved in, and, you know, we are actually, Dana mentioned the parade, which is Saturday, May 6th, and I don't know the exact details yet, but I do know a tribute to David is being planned for the parade. So, you know, if you come just again to say thank you to David. But the other area of my life which David and I intersected, besides the Beatles and besides cannabis, was libertarianism. I used to be very, very involved with the Libertarian Party in New York. I've sort of moved away from that now. But I went to the convention that Howard Stern was nominated. And of course, David Peel did Howard Stern's campaign theme song. And the really funny side note of this is that Howard Stern had a couple of books. His second one was called Miss America. And there's a chapter in Miss America about that libertarian convention. And he says, he talks about David Peel, he talks about the strippers, and he's like, there was this one guy who tried to say by unanimous consent we were going to nominate me, but they shouted him down. That was actually me, not named in the book. I kind of screwed up my parliamentary procedure. I meant to ask for acclamation, but I asked for unanimous consent. Of course, there were a lot of hardcore, long-time Libertarian Party people who weren't comfortable with the whole Howard Stern takeover. So, but the most important thing about David, and people have said this, is that he was a sweetheart. I didn't see him very often because I was like a suburban political activist, and he was a long-time denizen of the Lower East Side, which is part of how I hooked up with Dana, but he was a sweetheart. You know, the few times I did see him, he would always say, Doug, how you been? You look like the same as you did when we met in the late 80s, so young and healthy and refreshed, and he was just a super sweet guy. And, you know, just being here, I've learned so much more about him and appreciate him so much more and miss him even more. Thank you.
Now,
Richie, want to say something?
Oh yeah, okay.
Well, I'd like to say one thing. David Peel. My name is Richard West.
Over by the light, by the light.
I'm an actor, playwright, and a writer, and a musician. And I've been doing the Lower East Side Festival every year for 22 years, especially the outdoor part. We all plan on this, try to get everything from Bowery to Broadway, and we do hundreds of groups. Well, out on the street for 22 years, I've had a lot of fantastic talent. I got to say, David Peel was right up there. That guy, when he got on the stage, I mean, I know he's a lousy singer and all that, but he had always a great band with him. And when he was in sync with that band, they were fabulous. And the whole street was rocking. The Johnny Pumps was singing, the Cars, everything was all. It seemed like everything was in a floating bubble that he brought out. And there were a couple of years. We also had like great flamenco groups and great belly dance groups. You want to fill street bring out a belly dance group. I learned that in San Francisco. But David Peel can hold his own with anybody. He, you know, but as a soloist, you know, there was something to be desired. He sang in one note and stuff like that. Well, the reason why John Lennon really liked him is because he had this raw talent. That's what was the thing about, you know, David. He says he can't sing, he can't play the guitar, but this guy has something that's very real. Nancy is also doing a film. Nancy Cohn, she has a film. She did a film on Abbie Hoffman and a few other people. There was that punk guy also, Malcolm McLaren. And she's doing a film right now. David Peel is on it, and
A lot of David Peel.
a lot of John Lennon, and she's been chronicling things on her films. They've been shown on PBS and other places. As I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about David Peel, he was a man of humorous descent. I mean, he really was coming from a comic kind of thing. And when you got to know him, especially in his early days, he was terrifically always looking to have fun, to be a cut-up. If he would mock people, he was too pompous and things of that sort, and he'd draw all these people. So in that spirit, I wrote a little piece. It's a very short piece. It's a comparative analysis of the 60s and today. Well, let me put my glasses on. This is small writing. So, I mean, George Santayana famously once said that those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. But I say those who have learned from history are condemned to watch other people repeat it. Okay, now this also, over here, if you didn't see last Sunday, The Villager has an article that, and also the one last Sunday's New York Times, there's a very good article. And here's David Peel, along with Nobel Prize winners, and what the hell is he doing on this? Here's one columnist and Nobel Prize winner here, and here's David Peel. He got half a page here. Unbelievable. And it's very well written by this guy, William Grimes. All I know is David Peel was an original. Like when I wrote my play Warhol in Hell in '92, Dave came over to me and said, Richie, he says, Warhol is hell. Okay, so anyway, in the 60s, we rallied for civil rights, the war on poverty, and peace in Vietnam. We had a new left. We had an old left. Now nothing much is left, as we march for our underpaid jobs and overpriced apartments. In the late 60s, when I was living on the West Coast, there was flower power and sunrise meditations. Now it's become tequila sunrises and power lunches. In the 60s, we tried to expand and transcend the mind. Today, people try to keep from losing it. Their mind, that is, because they're trying to expand their income, and they're losing that too. In the 60s, we had many visions of utopia. Today, most people just dream of winning the lottery. We went to Woodstock. Now it's a good stock tip. We believed in the future. Now it's the next quarter. In the 60s, we experimented with our lives. The human potential movement. We introspected with encounter groups. We meditated to reach enlightenment, or satori. It was the interpenetration of East and Western cultures. So what's samadhi now? People just sit at the sushi counter eating yakitori. So much for the counterculture. And yes, so in the 60s we were connoisseurs of consciousness as we explored its steps and got spaced out with acid. Now it's antacid as the hipsters struggle for their own space. Yes, in the 60s we saw God in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower. Then it became the glitter and tinsel of the reflection of someone's ass, swaying in a disco ball. And if you're lucky, you score and you're in disco heaven. In the 60s, we went back to the land, and we went to the moon. Now we're running out of land. So who wants to live on the moon? In the 60s, money couldn't buy you love. Now the material girl will entertain any offer. In the 60s, sex was free and natural. Make love, not war. Now it's expensive and dangerous. make money, make art, anything but love. In the 60s we had communal living. Now it's codependency and Airbnb. In the 60s it was one big generation gap. We told it like it is, was, and should be, and we were rude to hypocrisy. Now it's the degeneration gap, and people are rude to each other while wearing the social mask and saying little. In the 60s, the conservatives went apeshit about the Red Menace and the Red Revolution. Now they drummed up a redneck revolution with the aid of a Putin love child. In the 60s, we hipsters tried to live idealistically in harmony with nature. Now it should be a matter of necessity as we realistically try to save the planet. In the 60s, we dropped out of the rat race of the establishment and joined Bohemia. Now too many rats run Bohemia. In the 60s, we tried to change the world. Now we have alternative facts, true lies, and virtual reality. In the 60s, we read voluminously. There were small used bookstores everywhere, particularly the downtown hip Manhattan. Now instead there are yuppie internet cafes with young professionals twittering away frivolously, never to plumb the depths of a book. In the 60s, people who exhibited this behavior were referred to as twits, yahoos, and halfwits. In the 60s, Dr. Timothy Leary prescribed advice. Turn on, tune in, and drop out. Now Donald Trump says, turn off, tune out, and drop dead. And if you're not paranoid, you're crazy. Now, in the 60s, the CIA used to make us paranoid. Now we're hoping they'll do the right thing and overthrow the Republican schmucktocracy. Thank you. Come to the LAS Festival 3 days and the 4th, and during the Veterans Day thing on May, the 27th, the 26th, 27th, Memorial Day. Those 3 days. It's free entertainment. It's a big, we keep it low-key because we can't accommodate everybody. But you guys deserve to be there because you're true Lower East Siders. What's that?
Tribute to David Peel for the LES.
Yeah, and also, you know, maybe we should also do a little own chant for Dave because he was a part of the rainbow thing.
Would people be okay if we stop sharing now so we can go say goodbye to him personally? Because we have to leave at 7.
Okay, listen! Okay, for those of you that, this is Pie Man again. I have something I forgot to mention to people. There is a movie that was on Showtime which features David in the beginning. It's called In Pot We Trust. It has one of our pot marches in the beginning. It's on, you can see that on YouTube. Can you remember that? In Pot We Trust. And I think it'd be a great idea for people one-on-one to pay their respects to David, if it can be done in a mellow way, because we want to give him a proper send-off to the clouds. And remember, David lives, and I want to see you bring at least 10 people each to the Pot March on the 6th. Because you got to show Sessions and these other idiots that we, the pot smokers, are going to prevail over the Neanderthal culture. Sessions doesn't realize that his own relatives in the rural South all smoke pot. You mean, pot is a major staple in that part of the country. Even all rednecks smoke pot. Everybody smokes pot. But Sessions has nothing but a fascist little dope.
It's a plant. It grows from the